My name is Margaret, and I'm 68 years old. I live alone in the house where I raised my children, in a quiet neighborhood outside of Columbus, Ohio. It's a big house for one person. 4 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, a garden I've tended for 30 years. My late husband Richard and I built our life here. We weren't flashy people. We worked hard, saved carefully, and when Richard passed 6 years ago, he left me comfortable enough that I never had to worry about money again. I tell you that not to brag. I tell you that because it matters for this story. It matters a great deal. My son Daniel is 42 years old. He has his father's eyes and, I used to believe, his father's heart. He married Sandra 11 years ago. Sandra is polished, well-dressed, and very good at saying the right thing at the right moment, at least in front of people who aren't watching closely. I watch closely. I'm his mother. It's my job. In the beginning, I told myself I was being too critical. Every mother-in-law thinks no one is good enough for her child. I knew that. So I swallowed my observations, smiled at holidays, and gave Sandra every benefit of every doubt I had. Then I started paying attention to patterns. 3 years into their marriage, Daniel called me on a Tuesday evening. His voice had that careful, rehearsed quality that told me he'd practiced this conversation. He said that he and Sandra had found the perfect house, but they were a little short. He needed $150,000. He said he would pay me back. He had a plan. He was very specific about the plan. I loved my son. I believed in his plan. I wrote the check. The payback never happened, not a single payment. When I gently brought it up 2 years later, Daniel looked genuinely confused, like I was speaking a language he didn't recognize. Sandra chimed in that they'd been under so much financial pressure, and wasn't family supposed to support each other? I nodded and let it go. That was my first mistake. Then there was Sandra's graduate school. She wanted her MBA. The program cost $42,000. Daniel called again. Same careful voice, same specific plan. I paid the tuition directly to the university. Sandra graduated, got a promotion, doubled her salary. Not once did either of them mention the money again. And then there were the 3 years I spent being what they needed me to be. When my grandchildren, twins, a boy and a girl, 7 years old now, were born, Sandra's mother was ill and couldn't help. So I became the childcare. I drove 40 minutes each way, 5 days a week, for 3 years. I fed those babies, bathed them, read to them, loved them with everything I had. I don't regret a single minute with my grandchildren. But I want to be honest about what it cost me. I gave up a trip to Portugal with my friend Helen. I postponed a knee surgery by 8 months because I couldn't be unavailable. I rearranged my entire life around their schedule without a word of complaint. Sandra went back to full-time work. They hired a nanny. They didn't need me anymore. That was that. I told myself that family wasn't a transaction. You give because you love, not because you're keeping score. And I believed that. I still believe that. But there is a difference between giving freely and being taken from quietly. And it took me a long time to understand that difference. My 70th birthday was coming up in the spring. 70 is not a small number. It arrived with a certain weight, a certain invitation to look back and look forward at the same time. I decided I wanted to do something meaningful. Not a small dinner at home, not a casual cookout in the backyard. I wanted a real celebration, the kind Richard would have thrown for me if he were still here. I found a restaurant called Waverly House on the east side of Columbus. It's the kind of place with white tablecloths and soft lighting and a chef who's been written about in actual magazines. I reserved their private dining room. It seats 50 people comfortably for a Saturday evening in April. I put down a deposit of $3,000. I designed the menu with the event coordinator, a warm woman named Patricia, who called me Mrs. Whitfield and made me feel like the whole evening was going to be exactly right. I invited 43 people, close friends, my sister Dorothy from Pittsburgh, my neighbor Frances, who has known me for 25 years, people from my book club, old colleagues, Richard's brother and his wife, people who had been part of my life, truly part of it. I told Daniel about the reservation in February. He seemed pleased. He said it sounded wonderful. He said Sandra would love it. I should have asked more questions about what Sandra would love. Through March, I handled all the arrangements myself. I confirmed dietary restrictions, finalized the seating chart, chose the flowers, white ranunculus and pale green eucalyptus, which had been my wedding colors, and selected a small gift for each guest, a little jar of local honey with a ribbon and a note. It was a lot of work, and I did it happily because I was doing it for myself and for the people I loved. 2 weeks before the party, Sandra called me. I want to describe this call carefully because the way she spoke matters as much as what she said. Her voice was warm and efficient, the way it gets when she has already decided something and is simply informing you of it. She said that she and Daniel had been thinking about the seating arrangement, and they felt it would flow better. She used that word, flow. If the central table, the large round one in the middle of the room that I had designated as the main table, were used for their friends who were coming. A group of 6 couples they had added to the guest list, apparently. I had not been told about these additions. She said I would be perfectly comfortable at the table near the window. She said it was actually a lovely table, quieter, more intimate. She said my friends would probably prefer it too, away from the noise of the younger crowd. I held the phone and looked out my kitchen window at the garden. I asked Sandra to repeat what she had said. She did, a little more slowly, as though the issue was that I hadn't heard her. I said, very calmly, that the central table was where I had planned to sit. It was my birthday dinner. I had designed the room around that table. She said, and I will remember this for the rest of my life. Margaret, it's just where you sit. The important thing is that everyone's together and has a good time. It's just where you sit. I said I needed to think about it, and I would call her back. She said, of course, and hung up in the bright, unbothered way of someone who considers the matter already settled. I sat in my kitchen for a long time. I thought about the $150,000. I thought about the $42,000. I thought about 40 minutes each way, 5 days a week, for 3 years. I thought about Portugal and my knee and every quiet sacrifice I had folded up and put away without a word. And then I thought about what Sandra had said. It's just where you sit. I thought about the fact that 6 people I had never agreed to invite were apparently already making plans to attend my party, at my table, in my private dining room, that I had reserved and deposited and planned for months. I thought about what it meant that my son had heard this plan, because he had, I had no doubt he had, and had said nothing to me. I made 2 phone calls the next morning. The first was to Patricia at Waverly House. I explained that I needed to cancel the reservation entirely. Patricia was professionally sympathetic. She reviewed my contract and confirmed that canceling 2 weeks out meant I would lose the deposit, but owe nothing further. $3,000. Gone. I said that was fine. I thanked her for all her help and I meant it genuinely. The second call was to my friend Helen. Helen is 71, sharp as a tack, and has been my closest friend since we taught at the same elementary school in 1987. She knows me better than almost anyone alive. I told her what had happened. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "So what do you want to do?" I told her. She said, "I'll make the reservation. There is a small French restaurant in German Village called Maison Bleue. It has 8 tables, exposed brick, candles and wine bottles, and food that makes you close your eyes." Helen called and reserved their best corner table for 6 people for the same Saturday evening in April. She asked them to prepare a small chocolate cake with a single candle. Then I called my sister, Dorothy, and my neighbor Frances, and my friend Carol from book club. I told them there had been a change of plans, an intimate dinner, just the 5 of us. They asked no questions. They said they'd be there. I did not call Daniel. I sent a group message to all 43 original guests. I kept it simple and gracious. I said that due to unforeseen circumstances, I was making the party much smaller. An intimate dinner with just a handful of my closest people. I thanked everyone for their love and support and said I hoped to see them soon. Then I put my phone face down on the kitchen counter and went out to work in my garden. I don't know exactly when Daniel and Sandra realized what had happened. I imagine it was sometime that afternoon when the messages started coming in from their friends asking about the change. I imagine there was a conversation between the 2 of them. I imagine Sandra's voice was no longer warm and efficient. Daniel called me at 4:30. I let it go to voicemail. He called again at 5. I let that one go too. He left a message the second time. His voice was tight and careful in a different way than usual. Not rehearsed, genuinely unsettled. He said he'd heard I canceled the restaurant, that people were confused, that he and Sandra were trying to understand what was going on. He asked me to call him back. I listened to the message twice. Then I put the phone back down. That Saturday evening in April, I wore the blue dress I bought in Santa Fe 3 summers ago. The one with the small embroidered flowers at the collar. I put on the pearl earrings Richard gave me for our 25th anniversary. I looked at myself in the mirror for a long moment, and I thought, I look like a woman who is about to have a wonderful birthday dinner. Helen picked me up at 7. Dorothy was already at Maison Bleue when we arrived, standing outside with Frances and Carol. And when they saw me, they cheered. Actually cheered right there on the sidewalk. And Dorothy grabbed me in a hug that nearly knocked me over. We laughed the whole way inside. The table was perfect. The candles were lit. The wine was a Burgundy that the young sommelier recommended with great seriousness and genuine expertise. We ate duck confit and roasted beets and a lamb that fell apart at the touch of a fork. We talked about everything and nothing. Dorothy told the story about the time she and I got lost, driving to our grandmother's house in 1974, and ended up in West Virginia by accident, which she has told at least 40 times, and which I will never get tired of hearing. When the cake came out, small, dark chocolate, 1 candle, they sang to me. All 5 of us sat in the warm light of that little restaurant, and I felt, completely and honestly, that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I did not check my phone once. I spoke to Daniel 4 days later. By then, the sharpest edge of everything had passed, and I was able to have a conversation rather than a confrontation, which was what I wanted. He said he didn't understand why I had canceled without telling him first. He said a lot of people were confused, and some of his friends were offended. He said Sandra was hurt. I listened to all of that. Then I told him, quietly and clearly, that I had spent a great deal of my life and a great deal of my resources making sure that the people I loved had what they needed. I told him about the $150,000, which we had never directly named in a conversation before. I told him about Sandra's tuition. I told him about 3 years of driving 40 minutes each way. I did not say any of it with anger. I said it like I was reading from a document. Here are the facts, plainly stated. Then I told him what Sandra had said to me on the phone. It's just where you sit. I told him that I had decided she was right. It is just where you sit. And I had chosen where I wanted to sit. He was quiet for a long time. I told him I loved him. I told him I always would. I told him that love and dignity are not opposites, and I was no longer willing to treat them as though they were. I told him that if he and Sandra wanted to have a real conversation, not a managed one, not a careful one, but an honest one, I was open to that. My door was not closed. He said he needed some time to think. I said that was completely fine. I had waited this long. I could wait a little more. Before we hung up, he said something that surprised me. He said, "Mom, did you actually have a good birthday?" I told him the truth. I told him it was one of the best evenings I'd had in years, that I had worn my blue dress in Richard's pearls and eaten the best lamb of my life in a restaurant with exposed brick and candlelight, surrounded by women who have known me long enough to tell embarrassing stories about me from 1974. He said quietly, "Good. I'm glad." And I think somewhere underneath everything, underneath the confusion and the defensiveness and whatever Sandra would say to him later that night, I think he meant it. That night after we hung up, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea and watched the light change over the garden. The ranunculus I'd planted along the fence were just beginning to come up, white ones, the same ones I'd chosen for the centerpieces that never happened. I thought about what it means to love someone and also respect yourself. I thought about how long I had believed those two things were in tension, that loving my family meant absorbing whatever they needed without asking for anything in return. I thought about all the quiet accommodations I had made over the years, the little contractions of myself that I had told myself didn't matter. They mattered. I am 70 years old. I have earned the table I sit at. I have earned the dress and the pearls and the burgundy and the chocolate cake with one candle. I have earned the right to be in the center of my own life. I did not cancel that party to punish my son. I want to be very clear about that. I canceled it because the alternative was to sit at a table near the window at my own birthday dinner, at a party I had planned and paid for, while strangers occupied the place I had made for myself. And I had finally run out of reasons to accept that. If there is anything I want you to take from this story, it is this: your love for your family is not measured by how much of yourself you are willing to disappear. You can love someone completely and still say no. You can love someone completely and still walk out of a restaurant, or cancel a reservation, or put your phone face down and go work in your garden. Tell me honestly, how many of you have spent years shrinking yourself to make room for people who never once noticed how much space they were taking? How many of you have told yourself it's fine, it doesn't matter, family is family? I see you, and I want you to know, it is not too late to sit at your own table. If this story meant something to you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you've had a moment like mine, a moment when you finally decided enough was enough, I would love to hear about it in the comments. Every story matters. Every one of you matters. Thank you for being here with me. I'll see you in the next one.